I am so incredibly grateful to be here, and I was reflecting as I was sitting in that chair. I was told I can't come down all the way down, so I'm going to go like that. I won't cross that line. I was reflecting, and I don't know where this was coming from, but I was reflecting on how unpredictable the world can be. The world of cause and effect, the world that we once maybe called reality, physical reality. And I was reflecting on 2015. Thank you, right? Who would have ever guessed everything that would happen next? And then I was reflecting on about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I think something changed in our outer world around that time. I was having lunch with my good friend Gregory on Union Street, and they came running in the restaurant and said, everyone needs to leave now, we're closing. And I thought, oh, San Francisco. I was one of those people, I'm just going to tell you, that was in complete denial. I'm like, oh, this will last about 5 days, and then we're all going to be back to hugging and being with each other. So why am I starting with that? I'm starting with that because we have an opportunity at every moment to choose where we put our focus. And I spent decades focusing on trying to change the world so that I could be happy. And at some point I realized not only does it not work, but it's an extremely painful way to live. Dr. Sue Morter says life is difficult and challenging until the day it isn't. We have been afforded, we've been blessed with, we've been given an opportunity to take a look at how we are being in the world. And the opportunity for us is to recognize that in relative reality, everything is changing, and we might have some judgment about that. I might have some judgment about that, and I just want to share with you, I thought the intention of the spiritual path was to learn how to change my mind. Reverend Joan, thank you for laughing. Because I spent so long doing that, and what I was doing is I was rehashing the story of my life. And at one point, I realized that the only past that actually exists is the past in our minds. And that what I had been calling reality was actually the illusion. And what at one point I thought was an illusion was actually reality. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, as I said in the reading, we're always creating our life, either unconsciously or consciously. And many of us are not even aware that we're doing it, not even aware that we're literally holding the projector and we're projecting onto a blank screen. Now let's dive into that a little bit, because what I'm not saying is what we see in the world isn't happening. Because I think sometimes it's easy for the mind to go there. As a matter of fact, if I say we're moving beyond the duality that the mind creates, we're moving beyond good, bad, right, wrong paradigm, it might be easy for the mind to say, but wait, this stuff is happening. And my mind is calling it horrific, right? People are dying. We see racism. We see things that are coming to the surface for healing, also, depending on how we view that. And so this isn't about changing the world or denying the world. And I think that's fundamentally important, because a master teacher, Jesus the Christ, and we say Jesus the Christ because the Christ is the consciousness, or we call it Buddha nature, or we call it our essential beingness. But Jesus the Christ came and said something that in one sentence I think has the most profound teaching of all, and that is to be in the world but not of it. And I'm going to give you an example, and I know when we talk about, as a matter of fact, we might even get our video, if I say certain words, the video might get blocked. Everyone's aware of that, right? We might not be able to even watch the video, so I hope that this can stay on Facebook. But about, I think it was in January, I was going to do a training in Fresno, and my husband came to me and said, honey, my friend told me that you might not want to go to Fresno because he saw in the news they were sending refrigerator trucks there because there were so many dead bodies. And so I said, well, I'm going to investigate that for myself. So I went onto the CDC website, and for the 8 weeks prior to that, the cases had been steadily going down. So at very least, I want to question reality as it has been fed to us. And one of the messages that I think we've been receiving in sort of the collective consciousness is fear and division. Right? How many times have we heard we live in a polarized country? And I actually think it's not that we live in a polarized country, but we have been conditioned to have polarized thinking. Good, bad, right, wrong. So if I question something, I get put in this camp. So if I wear a mask, I'm in this camp. If I don't want to wear a mask, I'm in that camp. If I get a vaccine, I'm in that camp. If I don't, I'm in that one. And then we make judgments about that, either direction, right? So we can turn the channel to a different news story, and we can hear completely different versions of the same event. And life is like that, right? We call it confirmation bias. And that's what New Thought has actually been teaching for a long time, and that is, based on the core decision that I've made about the world, it will influence how I experience the world. In other words, what I'm looking for, I'm going to find. Consciousness is an algorithm. And an algorithm is consciousness. So what do I mean by that? If anyone here is in the tech world, it's actually really simple. An algorithm does this. When I click on something, it automatically gives me more of that. If I click on it with an angry face or a smiley face, it doesn't matter. I get more of that. So the more I open certain stories, the more I focus on certain events in the world, the more my newsfeed will give that to me. That is not only an analogy of life, that's life itself, that's consciousness, right? So if I focus what's seemingly wrong in the world, the seeming division, the good, bad, right, wrong, I'm going to experience more of that. Krishnamurti, and I use this quote almost every time I speak, and that is, Krishnamurti said, the highest form of human intelligence is to see ourselves without judgment. So if I can take a look at how I'm creating my life, not from the lens of good, bad, right, wrong, but from the lens of, is this actually what I want? Is this who I've come here to be? Is this what I want to offer the world? Is this what I want to receive? That kind of rhymed, didn't it? That was really good, yeah. A little rhyme there. Who knew? Who knew? The title of the talk is something like, I never remember, I actually have to always look online to see, what's the title of the talk? Because, you know, we created, it's the consequences of consciousness, or the consequence of consciousness. Now, you might have been trained like I was to look at consequences as something kind of negative, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do this, and there's going to be consequences, right? That tone. But we can also look at it in a very different way, because blame is a very low frequency. And we are noticing a lot of it right now in our culture, right? Now, maybe I'm noticing it because that's my confirmation bias. It's possible. And so when I move beyond the good, bad, right, wrong, I start to ask myself, who have I come here to be, and what do I actually want to experience in the world? And levels of conscious awareness aren't good or bad. There's nothing inherently better about being a teenager than a child, or being a young adult than a teenager. We simply have different levels of awareness, levels of growth. So when I can open up and recognize that this isn't really about doing it right, because once I realize that it's not about that, then I open up to infinite possibilities, rather than staying stuck in duality. Now, all that sounds really wonderful, but how do we actually do it? And so my new book, Conscious Creation, I want to just for a moment acknowledge that it was born at Agape Bay Area about 2 years ago. I created this 5-step process to consciously creating your life, and we did a class on it. And I think it was 8 weeks, and we had a lot of fun with it. And I'm going to tell you briefly what the 5-step process is. I've given it an acronym, MOVIE, M-O-V-I-E, and it is creating the movie of your life with a recognition, as Byron Katie so beautifully says, we are holding the projector, and if we have a piece of lint on the lens, we will see it everywhere. And many of us believe it's about changing the conditions of the world so that we can be free, or we can be happy, or we can finally relax or be at peace. But the truth is, it's really about us clearing that lens so that we can begin to view the world in a very different way. In other words, it's actually not about what's happening in the world, it's about how I'm viewing it. And that is the greatest freedom. The greatest freedom is freedom from the reactive impulse. To not say there's something wrong here and I need to make it right. There's something good here, I need to acknowledge it. So the acronym MOVIE is very simple, and I created it because being in New Thought for many years and also doing spiritual counseling, working with people coming out of an addiction, there was a strong focus on wanting to create, a strong focus on goals or intentions, the law of attraction, change my thinking, change my life. A lot of New Thought circles live in that. When I came into New Thought in 1988, that was the conversation. Change your thinking, change your life. And I spent many years trying to do that. It was a very interesting ride. You know, at one point, I heard meditation practice. And I started asking myself the question, what are we practicing for? Right, because I thought the intention was the meditation itself, which of course it is. And it's really about a way of being in the world. Can I bring the consciousness of meditation into the world? The reason I say that is because when I was first trying to change my thinking and change my life, I started with a meditation practice, and it was new for me, and I was quite young, I think 23, I don't know, math is not always my strong suit. But when I sat down and started doing meditation, this is what it looked like, because I heard someone say the goal of meditation is to quiet your mind. And so I sat in meditation, and I'll just be transparent with all of you. This is really what it looked like internally. Please be quiet. Stop thinking. Why are you doing that? Why do you have that perspective? You shouldn't be thinking that. I'm supposed to be, no, stop. It was a very violent relationship. Right? Have you ever heard, I'm choosing to end an abusive relationship, and that abusive relationship was with my own mind. Right? Because I wanted it to be different. Because something felt wrong here. And if I could just change my thinking, I could create all the things in my life that I thought would make me happy. So people either use the law of attraction or New Thought principles or New Year's resolutions to try to create intentions. How many of you have done a vision board? Right? Most of us have done the vision board. And I remember at one point in my evolution, I made the vision board, and I had this moment when it was time to do the vision board. It was in a class that I wanted to have the vision board be blank, because that represented infinite potentiality rather than a finite idea of what I thought the world should look like. But guess what? I chickened out. Peer pressure, total peer pressure. Everyone was like gluing and like, oh, look at my jewels, and look at this hot person I'm going to be in a relationship with, and look at this mansion. I'm like, oh, I better do that. So I put it all on there. And it took me a couple of years, but I'm going to just tell you the truth. I manifested all of it. I mean, not exactly, but pretty darn close. If you can get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in San Francisco on the top of a hill, you've manifested something, right? Those of us who've lived in San Francisco know. And I had the partner, and I had the car, and I had the business. And something very remarkable happened for me. It didn't bring me happiness. It didn't bring me unhappiness either, by the way. It was much more neutral than I realized. And there was a deepening that was required of me at that moment. It was a request from a deeper place within me, and that request was to live beyond the conditions of the world. I had the calling to go into ministry, I had the calling to do work in addiction, I had the calling to write books. I resisted that calling, and when I said yes, everything changed. And I'll tell you how it changed. Everything on that vision board started disappearing. I lost the house, the partner left me, I lost the car. And I'll tell you why. It's not because there was something wrong. It was because my consciousness was yearning for something deeper, to actually tap into a different way of living, ultimate reality. And therefore, everything that was unlike it needed to dissolve. In other words, I had built the foundation on very shaky ground, and I built all of that, or manifested all of that, because I thought it was going to bring me happiness. And then lo and behold, I discovered that happiness is our true state. Joy is our true state. And so this 5-step process movie was created because it's important, as the reading said, to first take a look at what needs to be made peace with and what the unconscious beliefs, biases, points of view, stories. I mean, I could use so many words to that. What have I been carrying around? Reverend Joan and I I think it was with you, we did a retreat, and we asked people, and if it wasn't you, I'm sorry, but it sounds good anyway. We asked people to hold a backpack full of rocks. And they stood up in front of the room and they told the stories that they believed were keeping them feeling stuck while holding the weight of that story. And then we invited them, if they felt ready, to drop it and see what that felt like. One person said, no, I like it. It's helping me build my strength. Right? So there was not only the story, but there was a point of view about the story that was keeping this person holding that weight. And so then we can recognize that we do have a choice. And if the M, by the way, in the 5-step process is making peace with the past. The O is overcoming core false beliefs. And it's really not a core false belief, actually it's the frequency I've been carrying, because I don't actually think, interesting way to say it, I don't actually think that we create in the mind. Yes, of course the mind is creative, powerful, and wonderful. It's an amazing tool. But frequency or vibration is really how we manifest the life of our dreams. Because pure science, frequency is aligned. Right? And in spirituality, we recognize that as well. We're living in a time where the great mystical teachings and science are starting to come together. I think in India, they've been way ahead of us with that for a long time. But here we're starting to look at that. With the quantum field and quantum mechanics, what I expect to see, I will see. The vibration that I'm carrying will actually not only be magnetic to situations in my life, but I will literally be able to choose the situation differently. So if I'm carrying a core false belief that I'm not lovable, and I walk into a room and I'm looking for a date, who am I going to choose? I'm going to choose the person to confirm that I'm not lovable, and it won't be conscious, unless it is. But for most of us, or many of us, it's not conscious. And that's the great news. It's not because I'm doing something wrong. The consequence of my consciousness is that's all I will be able to choose. So yes, we talk about attracting. That's how we frame it now. I have a vibration and then I attract those situations into the world, and that, of course, may be true. But even more important than that, I'm attracted to that situation because it's literally the vibration that must align. I must find my vibrational match in the room. And then V in the movie, the 5-step process, of course, is visioning, which is profoundly different than visualization. And of course, I always want to honor Reverend Michael Beckwith, who created the visioning process in his powerful book, Life Visioning. And it took me 20 years in New Thought to understand the difference between visualization and visioning. Visualization is the vision board. It's like, what do I want to create? What do I hold in my mind so that I can manifest? Visioning is something altogether different. So once we've made peace with the past and we're in the process of overcoming our core false beliefs, we can create a space within ourselves where we can get still enough to listen to the profound knowing of spirit that we are. And from that place, there are infinite possibilities. From my mind, there's always a finite possibility. Again, not because that's good or bad, because my mind cannot possibly create infinite possibility unless I expand that mind and open up and ask questions and allow myself to realize that the true vibration that we all came in as, that spiritual essence, our true nature, is infinite. That's the truth of who and what we are. And as we unearth, right, Rumi says we're not here to seek for love, but only look at the barriers we put on top of it. That was a paraphrase. Once we start to unearth that, once we start to recognize that the true vibration of who and what we are is God's essence, true nature, we begin to understand at a very deep level that we receive messages from vision, which is very different from our mind. And the great news is when we get a vision, we have everything that we need to manifest that vision. We have enough energy, we have enough time, we have enough money, we have enough community. But when it's in my mind, this is my experience, it may not be true for you, and I find myself pushing. I want this, I need this must happen. Certain words that I've removed from my vocabulary. When we tap into vision, we start asking, what are the infinite possibilities for this community, for my work life, for my relationship? Then we move into the I and the E in the 5-step process, intention setting and embodying the vision. And so what I want to close with is taking a moment with the embodiment step. What does it mean to embody the vision? In one way, it's actually profoundly simple. When I catch a vision for my life, and by the way, when we vision, in my experience, it's always bigger than what I could have created in my mind anyway. Always. And the other thing that I've noticed is that it becomes more about we than about me. It becomes more of how can I be a radiant being in the world, not what can I get from the world. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get from the world. As a matter of fact, Reverend Joan and I talk about it's kind of a fun stage, right? It's like that, I call it magical thinking, the magical thinking stage where we're manifesting everything. It's kind of fun. And so there's a deeper awareness where really the embodiment is about radiating our true essence into the world, being that beacon of light in the world. We're no longer in the law of attraction, we're in the law of radiance. I'm here to radiate that frequency into the world, and then I can unplug from the conditions, and the greatest paradox happens. Then we can be part of making a difference in the world. Isn't that amazing? When I want the world to be different so that I can be happy, I find myself frustrated. I'm at war with. And it's easy right now. Let's just name it. It's easy. If you're watching the news, it's easy to get in it. I personally have done a news cleanse for about 18 months. No, maybe 16 months. I'd have to look at the calendar. Not because I don't want to know what's happening in the world, but because I don't want to buy into the paradigm of fear and separation. And again, it doesn't mean what's happening isn't happening, but what consciousness am I bringing? That's the embodiment. That's radiating that frequency. That's in the midst of anything in the world. I'm going to unplug from the collective consciousness that will have us being in fear and separate, and recognize that essentially we're all one. Essentially we are that God essence, and we are here to radiate that into the world. And as I love to say, life is a great experiment. So what I'm inviting is that we take this opportunity to spend some dedicated time listening to that inner wisdom, and recognize that as we tune into that frequency, we don't even raise our vibration, it's always there. We tune into that frequency, radiate that frequency, and see what happens.